Sciences, Paris. She taught at the Inalco University before becoming a CNRS research fellow and a member of the Center for South Asian Studies in 2006. She has published articles in Anand HSS, Indian Economic and Social History Review, the Medieval Journal, Religions of South Asia, chapters in edited volumes, and co-edited Cosmopolitanism,
Cosmopolitanism in South Asia and beyond.
Yes.
That will do.
Sources, itineraries, nouns. So languages, yes, I'll stick to languages. And cultural dialogue in South Asia and beyond, narratives, images, and community. A special issue of the Journal of the Economic and Social History of the Orient. In 2022, her book, Consolidating Empire, Power and Elites in Jahangir's India, 1605-1627, about which the talk is today, was published by Corinne in English.
Yeah.
So welcome to you.
Thank you very much. And so the book was published by Permanent Black and Ashoka University. Actually, that's a joint publication. And first of all, I'd like to thank the French Embassy, the Alliance Française, and of course the CSSS for having me here today. That's really a great pleasure and honor. So as I said, as we agreed, I'm gonna try to talk for half an hour, but and have a Q&A session afterwards. But if any question comes to your mind while I'm presenting, I really want this to be more as a conversation than a formal talk. So don't hesitate to interrupt. So this book about which I'm going to talk to you today, actually it started as a PhD more than 20 years ago. Then there was a French version published a couple of years ago, and I really wanted it to be available in English because most of my colleagues do not speak French, and that's absolutely all right with me. But in order, to have a serious discussion, it had to be done. So at the time I started this research. So in the very early, late 20th century, last century, the state of Mughal historiography was, in a sense, the historiography was very much focused, and it still is today to an extent, on two major figures, and you know who I'm speaking about. That is Akbar, the founder of the empire, and Aurangzeb, the so-called, the last of the great Mughals, and the man after whom the empire was supposedly started to decline. But what happened before Akbar, in between Akbar and Aurangzeb, and after Aurangzeb, remained very much in the shadow. So that's why initially I decided to pay attention to the first half of the 17th century. So that would be Jahangir and Shah Jahan's reign. That was the initial project, to provide a new reading of this half a century, where apart from, I'm a bit caricaturing here, but apart from the building of the Taj Mahal and the erection of Shah Jahanabad, supposedly nothing major happened. So with this idea in mind, I started at the beginning of the period, the reign of Jahangir, and I started to read the Jahangirnama. And as you know, Jahangir has kind of a bad press, you could say. He has not enjoyed a great reputation as a ruler. This I knew, but then when I started reading the Jahangirnama, I was very much struck by the contrast between the received wisdom in historiography about his reign and him as a ruler, i.e. as an incompetent ruler, and the voice I could clearly hear in his memoirs. And I don't know if some of you have read his memoirs, and it's really a fascinating text because it has, I mean, aspects of a very traditional chronicles, but it's also infused with the right humor of the sovereign. So you never know whether he's, you know, mystifying you or whether he's being serious. So I really got captured by this text, and when I finished reading it, it became obvious that I would, I mean, for the PhD project, I would never be able to go beyond Jahangir's reign because there were so many texts to study that I kind of gave up about Shah Jahan's reign. And so, as I was saying at the start, one of the first things I tried to do was to reconsider the received the wisdom about Jahangir. That is to say, the idea that he was a drunk and opium addict, dominated by his wife Noor Jahan, who you may see on the left-hand side. Yes, that's better. Like this, in a very manly posture, loading a rifle. And on the right-hand side, this is Itimad Uddaula, so Noor Jahan's father, who came from Iran in the late years of Akbar's reign, if I'm not wrong. And so the idea was that through these two figures, Jahangir lost any kind of agency, that the influence of Noor Jahan was evil, that he was but a puppet in his hands. And it's true, but I'll come back to this later, that Itimud Daula became Jahangir's Wazir and Vakil, and then his son Asaf Khan, the brother of Noor Jahan, succeeded him in this function. One other very circulated image was that so Jahangir was a puppet in the hands of Noor Jahan's family, and he was but a paid successor to Akbar. And I've chosen purposefully these two paintings because they really convey, I think, the contrasted images of both sovereigns. So on the left-hand side, you have an illustration from the Akbarnama depicting the siege of Chittorgarh, and you may see Akbar in the bottom left supervising the siege. So is very much into conquest, into military action. And by contrast, on the right-hand side, no, wait, you see what I mean, the other painting, you have Jahangir, whom it seems that has he's in a kind of inebriated state. He has trouble walking. He's, you know, supported by two women of the harem, and so he's entering the harem in order to celebrate Holi. And please note that this is not a Jahangiri painting, but a Shah Jahani painting, and that's important to keep in mind. So basically, that was the state of what we had about Jahangir when I started my research. And even though these last 20 years I've seen a number of publications devoted to Jahangir, the idea that his reign was not very important compared to that of Akbar and Aurangzeb is still very much with us today. So the first thing I did was to, the first thing I thought I needed to do was to in a sense, excavate, dig into this received wisdom and understand where these negative or gray images of Jahangir came from. And it's not moving anymore, the PowerPoint. So okay. Yeah. So one first literary tradition that I identified is the corpus comprised of the European travelers account. So here you see Thomas Rowe, but the earliest accounts, European accounts we have are those from the annual Jesuit letters. And here very quickly it became clear that their negative perception of Jahangir had mainly to do with the fact that they thought that he would convert once he had accessed the throne. They had a great relationship with him while he was a prince. As you know, he's very much interested in Christian paintings. And they were so much disappointed that that did not happen when he seized power. And I mean, every traveler account I looked at, they all had their own agenda being at the court. They all came there for a specific purpose. And in most cases, this did not become a reality. And as you know, Thomas Rowe had come here to negotiate a number of commercial privileges with the Mughal. He did not succeed in his mission. So, basically his argument that is in the letters he sent to the EIC is that there's no way to negotiate with that ruler because he has no power. So that's how, the Western image of this incompetent king came into being. But then if you look at the Persian chronicles that were produced in the early years of Shah Jahan, whom, as you know, had rebelled against Jahangir at the end of the latter's reign. These early chronicles, so here is the Masiri Jahangiri, but you have also the Irvalnama Jahangiri. Both were composed really in the early 1630s, and both authors were faced with a kind of dilemma because they had to justify Shah Jahan's rebellion without, let's say, questioning the legitimacy of his father. And they succeeded in doing so through saying that the rebellion had targeted Nur Jahan, who was an evil influence on Jahangir, but in so doing, in a way, they kind of sacrificed the political reputation in Jahangir, saying that, again, the rebellion was against her because power, real power, was within her hands. And so my argument is that these Proto-Orientalist and Indo-Persian traditions of negative representation of Jahangir, they're in a way coalesced during the British period. And as you know, the British representations of Mughals varied to a great extent from quite sympathetic and perception in the late 18th century, and from the mid 19th century onward, they did not want to be perceived anymore as heirs of the Mughals, a card which they had played at the start. And so accordingly, the image of the Mughals in general and of Jahangir in particular became blacker and blacker as the 19th century went on. And the only partial exception to that rule was the monograph by Beni Prasad, which was published in Allahabad in the early 1920s. But I think also that the fact that beside this, the specific historiographical tradition, the Western one and the Indo-Persian one that I've mentioned, another reason why Jahangir reign has not attracted the attention of scholars and of historians is because until, let's say, the late 20th century, the history of the Mughals has been very much oriented toward fact history, institutional history. And it's true that if you look at Jahangir's reign, and if you try to summarize what happened during his reign, almost nothing. I mean, you miss the usual markers of for the evaluation of the rule of a monarch. No conquest, no administrative reform, nothing of note. But I see, I mean, this so-called lack of traditional markers of history, rather as the sign of a methodological historiographical impasse than as the sign, as the proof, let's say, that there is nothing to unearth where the reign of Jahangir is concerned. So it's with this idea in mind that the second thing I really cared about was to look afresh about all the materials that were that conveyed the voice of Jahangir. So that meant re-examine text. So on the left, you have the first page of the autograph manuscript of the Jahangirnama that is kept at the National Museum in Delhi. And so a text that has been known for, I mean, ever since the reign of Jahangir, it has never been lost or whatsoever. And on the right-hand side, you have a very interesting text that was discovered very recently. I mean, in 2000, in Lahore, in the private papers of a city notable who had just died, and it was published by a couple of Pakistani scholars in Tehran in 2006, and nobody until that time had ever heard about that text. We knew about the author because he had been working at the Mughal court with the Jesuits, and he had translated a number of Latin works, of catechetical works into Persian, but we didn't know about this text. And it is basically, I will come back to it in a sec, but basically it's a night chronicle of 3 years of Jahangir's reign, and it's constructed as a dialogue. So it narrates the exchanges that took place at night in the Diwan-e-Khas, in the private hall of audience. But texts are not the only media through which Jahangir, let's say, narrated his sovereign self. So for me, it was very much important. It has been very much important as well to take into account the very rich painting commissioned by Jahangir, who was probably, together with Shah Jahan and maybe more than Shah Jahan, one of the greatest patrons of painting, and who really made the emperor a major subject of representation for the artists of the court. So paintings, architecture, inscriptions. So you have Akbar's mausoleum in Sikandra, an inscription that Jahangir had engraved on an Ashoka pillar that was in Allahabad when he was himself in rebellion against Akbar. And this is one of the picture walls of the Lahore fort. So Sikandra and the Lahore fort are probably the best preserved vestiges of Jahangir architecture, of which not much is left because Shah Jahan did not like what his father architectural taste. So he had destroyed a number of structures that Jahangir had built. So architecture, inscription, but also metalware. So here you have what have been for long called, a Moor portrait, but that's not a coin. That's a devotional portrait of Jahangir engraved on coin, on metal, on gold, that was distributed to his disciples. And you have also a very classic rupee minted with Jahangir's complete title, which would be Nuruddin Jahangir ibn Akbar Pacha. And I want to pause a little about this title because, as one of the challenge I had to deal with was the wide variety of media that were mobilized by Jahangir in order to express himself and to circulate his ideology and his imperial discourse. And so within the same medium, let's say text or painting, I really heard distinct voices, sometimes contradicting voices, and it took me a long time to process this fundamental ambiguity, ambivalence in Jahangir's royal discourse. And to give you a clear example, let's have a look about this title, Nuruddin Jahangir ibn Akbar Pacha. So even what were the kind of messages that it may be thought, as a kind of summary of the imperial discourse, because it was struck on coins, it was apposed on farmlands that were circulated throughout the empire. So that was the briefest shape in which this discourse was circulated throughout the realm. So first of all, and the fact that he called him, that he added that he was the son of Akbar is very specific because no Mughal rulers before him or after him did that. So it kind of puzzled me, and it puzzled because what this convey is, of course, it's a dynastic message, and the most learned among the courtiers knew that the Mughals had Timur and Genghis Khan as ancestors. But we also know that, as I said earlier, Jahangir rebelled against Akbar. So it's kind of ironic as well to systematically call yourself the son of Akbar, whereas you came to power against his will. So this is the first instance of ambivalence. Then, as you know, he was born Salim, and he decided to rule as Jahangir, the world conqueror. And again, if there is, he is absolutely not known for his territorial conquests. He really did not take the conquest state option that Akbar had followed. So irony is there again, but I argue that the kind of conquest he got involved into was more the idea to kind of a communication campaign directed at the elites of India and of Iran and also Central Asia, through writing, through paintings, etc., to state again and again that Hind had become, under his rule, the real center of the Persianate world. And last but not least, Nuruddin, the light of religion, and the ambiguity of this laqab, of this honorific title, is still, it's so important that even today you find very contrasting, opposite, I would say, even interpretations of it within the historiography. Some argue that it is perfectly in line with the Illuminationist theory of sovereignty that Akbar had adopted. And other scholars say that, on the contrary, it shows that from Jahangir's onward, the religious ideology and policy of the Mughal started shifting toward a more conservationist vision and practices of Islam. And a number of, so as you see, what I'm trying to say is that it's at times very difficult to reconcile the different statements of Jahangir through different medias used, but also within one and the same medium. And 10 years ago, I think that there was this book, very important book published by Asfar Moin, The Millennial Sovereign. And to make sense of this ambivalence and ambiguity in Jahangir's discourse, he suggested to, he divided the imperial discourse between two separate discursive spheres. One he proposed was exoteric, and it was circulated through the documents that were meant for a public audience, a large audience, and it included within that the Jahangir's memoirs, architecture, I mean the architectural buildings that were, the parts of the buildings that were open to all. And he said that through these public statements, the image Jahangir conveyed was a very traditional one as a temporal ruler. And then there was another level of discourse, an esoteric one, that was only accessible to the disciples and the very close associates to the emperor. And this, according to Moin, was essentially conveyed through painting, which was in his eyes a sacred medium. So a very clear-cut divide between the voices of Jahangir. But for me, I mean, this is at least it's very important to take into account the audience. I mean, to which kind of people Jahangir was addressing through these different materials, because many historians or art historians don't even bother, asking that kind of questions, and you miss a lot when you don't do that. But if you look, for instance, at these two texts, so this is the public written material, and this Majalisi Jahangiri, actually the author said that he wrote it as a manual of spiritual guidance for the disciple of the emperors. But then if you look at both texts at the same time, you realize that there are hints in the Jahangirnama about the sainthood of Jahangir. It's not all about being a temporal leader and attending to the usual business of kingship. And conversely, in the Majalisi Jahangiri, Jahangir is depicted also as being reluctant to unveil his messianic status, his being a saint of the new millennium, etc. So it's more complicated, I think. And the same holds true for painting, because in addition to the illustrations of the Jahangirnama, which are a kind of a visual archive of the reign, you have, on the one hand, series of portraits which are very mimetic in nature. here you have a drawing, and you see that Jahangir is depicted as a man who is getting older. Time has left traces on his face. So he's a normal human being. He's gonna die someday. And on the other hand, you have this series of so-called allegorical paintings, where by contrast, he's portrayed in a very timeless way, a very symbolic way. And so again, you see that you can't, I mean, to my mind, you can say that painting is all about extolling the sacredness of Jahangir. At work here, you have the same polyphony, in a sense, that you have in the written materials of the reign. So what I tried to do in the book was to keep this polyphony alive and not try to impose on Jahangir's discourse a kind of systematism that was never there in the first place. And that's why I tried to reconstruct his discourse following the three elements of the title I mentioned earlier. So the Ibn Akbar Bacha, the Jahangir stuff, and then the Nuruddin element. But one other thing that was very important to me, I mean, the book does not provide any linear history of the reign. That's not a biography. I was not interested in doing that. But the next thing, and the idea was of the book was not to focus solely on himself, but to, in a way, circumvent him like you do at a Sufi shrine, to take all different kind of perspectives and voices as well. So what I did in the second and third parts of the book was to pay close attention to, first of all, the political and military elites of the reign. So mostly the amirs, the highest ranking mansabdars of the empire. And I did that, as you may know, I mean, for a long time, the historiography on the Mughal nobility has been, again, very close to positivist readings, quantitative analysis of the different communities within the nobility. And that's very much important. I'm referring here to the work, for instance, of Muhammad Attar Ali from Aligarh. And that was the first very important step in order to have an idea of the general forces at hand within the empire. But the problem is that kind of quantitative statistical studies do not address the perceptions and the reactions of the elites toward the rule of which they were agents. And so what I did instead was to follow a number of individual case studies, just like, you know, this is a page from an imperial album from the Royal Library, where Jahangir collected the portraits of the amirs, but also of foreign rulers. And in kind of the same way, I became very much interested in the sub-imperials materials of the reign, because there are quite a lot of them. So by sub-imperial materials, I mean either the text or the buildings or the paintings that were either produced by or commissioned by the leading amirs of the reign. So on the left-hand side, you see Abdulhaim Khani Hanan, who was a representative, let's say, of the old Iranian nobility within the empire. In the center, this is Ranjan Lodi, so an Afghan who became a very high-ranking Amir during Jahangir. And the last on the left hand, your right-hand side, is Ramdas Kashwaha. So you know the Kashwa, like Rajaman Singh, and you know, they were the clan that first entered into matrimonial alliance with the Mughals. But Ramdas was not part of the major lineage of the Rajavad lineage, from which had entered into these alliances. And the reason why I selected these three and others Amirs is because we had materials about their career, a chronicle in honor of Abdurrahim, likewise for Ranjan, and a later text about the life of Raja Ramdas. And they also, for a number of them, commissioned buildings, paintings. And so analyzing these sub-imperial materials was very important to bring into light the general features, I would say, of the Jahangir's policy vis-à-vis the political elites. As you know, and in this he was only following, in a sense, what Akbar had started, and which I would call political cosmopolitanism, that is the willingness to not depend on any single group. As you know, the Humayun, and that had been the case for Babur and Humayun, who heavily relied on Central Asian elements, and it turned out to be not the wisest choice for Humayun. So from Akbar time onward, the idea was to rely on a wider pool of human resources, and that would mean attracting men of the sword and of the pen from rival Muslim polities like the Safavid Empire, and continuing also to patronize Uzbek begs as well, but also co-opt, in a sense, the South Asian political actors, whether they were Muslim or not. And that's, of course, the case of the warrior elites who were the Rajputs, but also of a number of tribal castes like the Khatri and the Kayach. And so these figures, they also illustrate the main, let's say, shifts within a global continuity of Jahangir's policy vis-à-vis the elite. I mean, you know that his reign has been very much associated with the rise of Iranians to power, negatively through the figure of Noor Jahan, as I said in the beginning. But the reality is that these Iranians, they combine, you know, administrative and financial, commercial skills that made them very attractive for empire building. And so through Noor Jahan, her father, her brother, he built a very efficient network to attract these Iranians to Mughal India, but they were working to the benefit of the empire. They were not, you know, leeches sucking the blood out of the Mughal dynasty. And another major feature of Jahangir's policy vis-à-vis the elite was the integration within the empire of groups that had, until the end of Akbar's reign, be enemies of the empire. That's the case with the Afghans, or that had been marginalized. And that's the case of this let's say, minor lineage within the Kashwaha clan, but also with the Bundelas of Orcha, which had been until then always looked upon by the Rajput clans of Rajasthan. And I'm sure you know the story of Jahangir commissioning the murder of Abul Fazl to Bir Singh Deo. And so he was very generously rewarded during his reign by becoming the first Rajput Amir of the court. And another interesting thing, I mean, a reason why it's very important to look at that kind of materials that were produced by or for the Amirs is that they convey their own political perceptions, their own political ideological representations, and their positioning vis-a-vis the emperor. And what is very interesting when you look at them closely is that their integration within the empire never really translated into a process of radical acculturation, but it proceeded through selective appropriation. And in this text, you have always this tension between the Amir, between being an agent of the empire, but in a sense being also a clan leader, a little king of its own, thanks to the financial rewards as well. I mean, imperial service was, in a sense, for many of them, a fantastic springboard to achieve a higher social status that they had previously, even though that would not be the case exactly for Abdurrahim Raniranan. And what is also very interesting is the status that the emperor is given in this text, because there is no ideological contestation in that works. They all recognize the legitimacy of the ruler, and is depicted as the ultimate benefactor, the ultimate patron of the community. And in the case of the Brajbasha Charita that were written at Orchard's court, Jahangir is also assimilated to the local figures of kingship. So he's clearly compared to Rama and other, major figures of Indic royalty. So no ideological opposition at work in these materials. And indeed, it's also significant that you had no major rebellion during rebellion from the Amirs during Jahangir's reign, which had not been the case during Akbar's time. But if there was no overt resistance, it did not mean that the agents of the empire accepted that they were absolutely loyal to the empire. And what I have found out, in line with what Muzaffar Alam has depicted for the 18th century, or Chetan Singh for Punjab in the 17th century, is that the highest ranking among them, that they, of course, officially abided by the rules of administration, which the main purpose of which was centralization and, the division of powers at the provincial level, so that the Amirs were not able to build local bases of autonomy. But in every cases, when you read the chronicle of their life through the appropriation as well of the imperial model, of the imperial chronicle, you start to see that all of them try to gather in their hands the different provincial functions that were supposedly divided, that they required from the provincial subjects the same obedience and rituals that were normally the prerogative of the ruler. So very briefly said, you know, the process, the 18th century process of regionalization and of creation of autonomous regional states by amirs, who were initially the subadars, so the governors of the provinces, or the diwans, the finance ministers of the province. You can really already feel it, not to the same extent, in a sense, but the provincial level was really the level at which these amirs tried to exist not only as loyal servants of the empire, but also as rulers for their own sake. And so I've spoken. You were supposed to to stop me. So maybe okay, so I'm gonna try to be quick on so for the I mean, obviously, another major group of actors in the empire were the religious elites, whether Muslim or not. And here again, I mean, my ambition was twofold, because as you know, again, when you talk about the religious policy of the Mughal, we have again the same usual suspects. Akbar created the so-called Mughal tolerance, and then from Jahangir's onward, it slowly deteriorated, and it became very orthodox, anti-Hindu under Aurangzeb. But you don't really get the chance to know how this supposed evolution take place when you read, you know, general histories of the Mughal or studies of Shah Jahan or Jahangir. There is no detailed study of their religious policy. So one of the ambition in this last part of the book was, again, first to reassess the religious policy of Jahangir. Did the so-called degradation of the tolerance start with him or not? And then again, I didn't want to stop with the imperial management of the empire, but also to scrutinize what the religious elites, ideally comprised of Muslim and non-Muslim, how they assessed and reacted to the spiritual positioning of the emperor, but also his religious policy. So first thing about the religious policy, let's say that by and large, just like the policy towards the Amir, it's very much in continuity with what Akbar had inaugurated, you know, the so-called Sulikul, the universal conciliation. If you keep in mind that Sulikul was never about equal treatment of all the religious communities of the realm. There, from the very start, there were strong preferences within the Sufi milieu and within the, you know, the diverse Hindu spiritual traditions. So it means, as you know, that the preference of Jahangir in the Sufi sphere went to the Chishtiya, who had become the tutelar order of the dynasty under Akbar. And here you see the Dargah of Muinuddin Chishti in Ajmer. Likewise, within the Hindu diverse sectarian communities, the most lavishly patronized were the Krishna temples of the Mathura, Vrindavan area, and there is a continuity there as well. Same thing with the famous, you know, ascetic Jadrup, whom Akbar had visited a number of times, and Jahangir perpetuated this tradition. And according to me, it also, this continuity this continuity also holds true regarding the Sikh and the Jain communities, even though the received wisdom is that that's towards these communities that Jahangir departed from the patronage of Akbar. But in that case, you have to re-examine the actual evidence that are put forward for the time of Akbar. Because if you do that, you realize that there is no actual evidence that Akbar gave lands or, I don't know, fiscal exemptions or any kind of privilege to the Sikh communities, to the Sikh community. And the relations with the Jains, they were cordial at least, but we can't talk of patronage. And so what happened under Jahangir, the so-called execution of Guru Arjan, if you look again at the very contemporary materials, there is no hard evidence that he ordered his execution. In the Jahangirnama, it is said that he had him chastised, but the word used in Persian is siyasat, and siyasat can mean, I mean, a whole range of punishments. And as you know, this image of Sikh martyrdom only appeared much later, and that's not my argument. That's one among others of Louis Fenech. It really appeared in the 18th century. But when you look at both Sikh and Indo-Persian and European sources contemporary to Guru Arjan's death, you don't find any hard evidence of that. So a pattern of continuity on the one hand, where the religious policy is concerned, and on the other hand, Jahangir knew also very well to distance himself from the model of, I mean, yeah, from the orientations of Akbar when he deemed it necessary. And as you know, probably by the end of Akbar, his claims to be a mujadid, I mean, a messiah, a saint, had really irritated the conservative and neoconservative Muslim elites. And Salim, so the future Jahangir, was very much aware of this, let's say, of this discontent. And he did two things vis-à-vis this discontent. First, he capitalized on it when he was a prince, and he really said in a way, yes, I will be the one to restore a more orthodox form of Islam in order to recruit to benefit from the support of this group of ulama and Sufis. So thanks to their help, he did seize power. He had also other supports, but they were one of them. And he continued to support them almost throughout his reign. But on the other hand, this conciliatory attitude did not mean that he gave up on the messianic claims of Akbar. And this is very much clear in the Majalisi Jahangiri I talked to you about, where you find him, narrating a series of dreams, and all the dreams are about the same thing, i.e., direct communication between Jahangir and God, saying that there is no more intermediate. I mean, Mohammed is not needed anymore, because communication is going on directly between God and Jahangir, and he's going to be the renovator, the renewer of this new millennium. So, so he did not gave up on these claims, but it chose to not express them publicly. And now we come back to a part of the argument that Afzal Moin has made. And, by way of, so in a sense, there are hints about these claims in the Jahangirnama, but it's true that it's not the same situation like it was in the Akbarnama, the very official chronicle of the reign, when it was written black on I mean, on paper, that Akbar was the saint of the age, and Jahangir was much more cautious than that. So in a way, he ceded some ground. I don't know how, if that's correct in English, vis-a-vis the conservative and neoconservative forces of Islam. And to stop, I took again 3 main examples between, so I told you the ambition was to recover the voices of all kinds of religious elites, but I was not able to trace non-Muslim writings about the religious positioning or policies of Jahangir. You have that for Akbar. I mean, Audrey Trushka, for instance, has made a wonderful job excavating Sanskrit Jain Charitras about Akbar, and you have vernacular materials for Akbar as well. But for Jahangir, it's as if the Mughals had, but by that time, become usual business and their religious views as well. So you have stuff about Jahangir, but not specifically on his spiritual claims and religious policies. So I had to focus only on Sufis and ulemas, and I took 3 examples that are very interesting. So this is the Dargah of Sheikh Abdul Haq Muhaddis Dilabi in Delhi. So a Qadiri and moderate revivalist Sufi, we will say. Then you have the first page of the more famous Maktubat of Sheikh Ahmad Sirindi. So this Naqshbandi Sufi who claimed as well to be the Mujtahid of the second millennium of Islam, and who was in direct competition with Jahangir. And last but not least, here is the Dargah of Abdurrahman Chishti in Awad, so who is a representative of a much more open Islam vis-a-vis the non-Muslim Indian environment. And what is very interesting is that all 3 of them, they did spend quite a number of years at court between the late 16th and the early 17th century. So they all had the opportunity to witness firsthand the atmosphere of the court. I mean, they had this direct experience. And whether or not this court exposure had something to do with them, with that, later on, they all put pen to paper to write about their social-political expectations. I mean, within the Sufi literature, you have the majority of writings that deals with mystical, theological issues, but these 3 figures, they really, I mean, the Muhaddis dedicated a small advice work to Jahangir. We know about the political expectation of Jahangir of Sirindi through the letters he sent to the emirs, and we have a number of writings of Abdurrahman Chishti that bring into light his positioning. And so all in all, you have 2 major trends within this Sufi and juristic Islam. That is a movement of opposition and contestation vis-a-vis the religious liberalism, economism, whatever you want to call it. So, and the minimal that these people were asking was at least to re-establish a legal discrimination between Muslim and non-Muslims, because you know that by that time the jizya had been abolished, and for them that was something that that had to be restored because the supremacy of Islam had to be clearly stated within the imperial framework. And on the other hand, you have the Chishtiyas and all the Sufi adepts more open to, let's say, the local spiritual traditions, more inclined toward Wadat al-Wujud, the unity of God in different guises, who were one of the main, let's say, influence behind the building of the ideology of Sulikul. And when this Sulikul was attacked by the neo-conservative Sufi and ulemas, Sufis like Abdurrahman Chishti, he stood up in defense of both the ideology and the religious policy of the Mughals. So I'm sorry, I took me so long, but I will stop here, and thank you so much for your patience and attention.
Shall we take questions now?
Of course.
Let's start with a very simple question because I'm not a historian.
It's okay.
I wanted to take you back to that first image you showed of Jahangir playing holy, surrounded by women. You said unsteady, being supported there. So, is this if this is painted while he's still emperor? Doesn't the emperor have control over the images depicting him? That means, is Jahangir all right to be shown in this light? What? I just want you to know a little more about the date of the painting and why Jahangir would agree to be portrayed in this way, in contrast to a very staged imperialist sort of war scene with Akbar, there in the bottom left, which is obviously telling a very standard story of, conquest and empire building, and, here I am, emperor, this is how I became who I am. They're very serious. And this is very non-serious. So I'm intrigued because I would have thought the emperor would have had some control over the images that are circulating, depicting him. So this, when you were showing it itself, I sort of,
yeah. That's a very good point. And actually, I did say it, but probably too quickly. It was commissioned by Shah Jahan, not by Jahangir. But I mean, your question was the right one to ask, because of course he did have control. And his memoirs are full of remarks. I mean, he's noted among the Mughals for his taste and connoisseurship. I think that's how you say it. You say it in English, in painting. And what is also very, very interesting is that, for instance, you see it here in the album pages information of portraits. These are his autograph notes. So we really have evidence saying, for instance, oh, this portrait is well made, or this is so and so after, I don't know, I promoted to the rank or blah, blah, blah. I don't
very
know.
short inscription.
Yeah, sometimes
a long one.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just, identity. It's just the name of the person who is represented. And sometimes it comments or on the person or on the quality of the portrait. And there is also a very interesting passage in the Jahangir where Rajarandas, so the Rajputs, so here it says Surat Rajarandas Kashmara. So just plain identification. But in the Jahangir you have this passage where So Ramdas has failed in the military campaign. I don't remember which one. And Jahangir got like super angry, and he took the portrait of the Raja in his hand, because the Raja was away in campaign, and he started abusing him, saying, my father took you under his protection, and your life was worth 2 paisa, and now you have been such a failure. I'm so disappointed by you, something like that. So it's very interesting that we have these autograph notes, and that we have also glimpses into the ways these portraits were used at court.
Yeah, give it over to the historians.
The historian was not of India at all. I was just asking, in terms of Mughal historiography, you talked about the discovery of this
Manuscript, yeah.
Where one knew the writer or one didn't know. But I was asking a larger question about emperor-centered history. Now, we know that, particularly in Mughal India, much of it they define a phase of Mughal history. So one thinks of the Jahangir period as a time of, say, of the visit of the Jesuits, of a major kind of developments in painting. Jahangir is a pretty major painting. One thinks of Shah Jahan much more from the architecture, because it was about Shah. But I was just wondering that, given the directions in Mughal history, say, beginning with the imperial system, really countries, but also to do work on women in the Mughal court, on textiles, and on a series of other areas, and of course on the entire question of, the administration, Mughal administration, regular administration, all of that. What is involved in returning your work? You said that Jahangir remains somewhat underrepresented, perhaps because there is no major event of investigation. But I was nonetheless wondering if you could tell us a bit more in terms of the directions in Mughal historiography. What is entailed in this return to Jahangir, or in this very detailed look at Jahangir, the way of looking at consolidation of the empire. So of course it's not just, it is on a larger argument about, the way he is position, etc. This emperor-centered history, what would be your position on it?
Yes, you're right. It's very traditional and major figures oriented. But the thing, so in a sense, yeah, there are many answers, and that's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking it. So what we have, the fact that, let's say, until the second half of the 17th century, we don't have archives for the Mughals. So we're down to adopt the elite perspective. And even the few works that have been done on women, it's really, against the grain reading, and you don't get that much. And now it so happens that now I'm working on the history of Delhi. And so, like women, the cities are not really an object of historical narration at the time. So things become more difficult when you don't, let's say, follow the emic categories of narration of the materials you're using. But so that's an element of answer. And another one would be that the evolution of Mughal historiography since let's say the late 20th and the early 21st century has been globally a move away from eco-institutional history toward cultural history and taking into account the ideological agency of the patrons and of the authors. So away from a more again statistical but quantitative approach. But what I've done, in a sense, I mean, in the attention I pay to the discourse, etc., I'm very much part of this so-called new Mughal historiography, cultural historiography. But for me, it's important as well to, I mean, a study of the Mughal Empire that would be all about discourse. It's not sufficient, because at some point you really have to confront the ambitions and what happened on the ground, even though all you have to get by to know what happened on the ground are not archives, or, you know, but you have to go as far as you can go with chronicles or coins, or, I mean, use every materials that that you have at your disposal. But very recently, I don't know if the name will ring a bell to you, but there is Navin Kanalu, who has finished a year ago a PhD on the reign of Aurangzeb, but which is absolutely not emperor-oriented, which used the legal archives of the emperor, and whose ambition is to shed light on the legal dimension and working of the empire. And he has been able to dig out a wonderful number of documents, both in Persian and in the vernaculars. He knows Arabic, so he has also worked with the Fatawa Jahangir, that kind of, you know, very important, because where sources are concerned, we mostly rely on Persian sources, material culture, but the production in Arabic was very important as well. And these have been really almost not studied. So I think that it's a very promising avenue for Mughal research. Does that answer the question?
So it was coming part of not knowing fully. I mean, I fully understand that the Jahangir Nama remains a text one can read and reread the pencil way, and then you will use it to vis-a-vis other new kinds of material. So that was really the thrust of it. So, but just to ask, because Jahangir, at least the first part of the talk, was essentially about why Jahangir. So, in a way, why you are interested in Jahangir because it seemed to be somewhere between in this transition from and also to these two. So, which is, and there was a lot of details that you did, you know, the role of Iraq and Egypt, trying to recover from the grip of his people that he was a puppet, but nonetheless, how does one recover his role is argument. So in some ways, it is centered on the river, and then of course you are moving into another. So that was really the thrust, and you did answer and tell me that how one is returning to it through a different lens, which is to try and understand a larger culture of the mind. I just, one more question I have is about Lahore. Because in a way, Lahore remains the center of that. So, what was when you go through the Lahore form, for instance, how does it compare with, say, the other Mughal forts we see? What does the Lahore fort compare? It is vision there, it's status. I think the other vision, that was just an interest one had, because it's a bit, few of us are visiting that. Have you been to Lahore?
It so happens that I've just spent a week in Lahore for the first time in my life last week. So I had never seen the Lahore fort. I had never seen Jahangir's mausoleum, Nur Jahan mausoleum, Asafran mausoleum. No. And I mean, by chance, I met a French colleague in Lahore, and we had dinner together, and she's working on Hindi and Urdu literature. She has done her PhD on the Shah Ashok genre. And we were having dinner, and that was her first time in Lahore. And we were like, but how stupid we are not to have come to Lahore before. And I mean, it's such important in the history of Mughal India, and especially where Jahangir is concerned. For me, it was not just like performing the Hajj, because I see Jahangir very much as, I see Lahore very much as a Jahangir city, because he's buried there, because, as I said, one of the major structures he not totally patronized, but we have his stamp on the Lahore fort. And I mean, kind of naively, the first answer that I would, what's the difference between the Lahore fort and the, I don't know, the Agra fort, the Qilai Mubarak, is that it's just full of iconography. You know, you have this tile mosaic on the outer walls. No, go back. So you see, it's all covered. The northern and western walls are all covered with figurative tile mosaics, and Eva Kor has analyzed this. That's really, you know, an assimilation of the book of Jahangir with Solomon through the angels catching demons to show the universality of his rule, just like Solomon's. And within the fort, then you have frescoes, which, I mean, we know, for instance, that frescoes.
Yeah, on what things.
On the in the Diwani Am, in the Diwani Khas.
Scenes from Jahangir's. But what is the subject of the frescoes?
The problem is that they are, some of them are really damaged. Some of them have been repainted during under Ranjit Singh. Some of them have been restored, but not restored, let's say, reinvented. They have not tried to, you know, look at what was under the white, I don't remember the name in English, but the white covering. Yeah, thank you. That's it. But it so happens that there is a new small collective in Lahore made of people who are both art historians and artists who have become really tired to wait for the authorities to move. And so they have just recovered a number of paintings that were lying behind the line. So you have also these angels and demons, but you have a whole bestiary. You have lots of flowers, and apparently there is also a small pavilion where they have discovered paintings maybe of the 4 apostles. But there is, from what I understood, there is an ongoing debate. They say it's from the Mughal time, and another art historian said that it dates from the Ranjit Singh period. The best work that has been done on Lahore, whereas where the description of monuments is concerned, dates from the colonial period by a Muslim scholar of Lahore. But since then,
it's interesting to actually hear of Jahangir as a kind of interregnum in Mughal historiography, because, and that's true, of course, but on the, I think people of my generation also who have seen a lot of Hindi films, a lot of these names are household names. Abdul Rahim Khan, and so there is a lot of sort of popular presence of the Jahangir era in pop culture, particularly in film and so on. And perhaps that's in a way a kind of continuation of what you're saying, is that there is a particular picture in the chronicles that then seeps into kind of modern print and then comes down to pop culture and film and so on. But I was sort of curious that in trying to, again, just building up on this question on returning to the emperor, as it were. I mean, a lot of the state and institutional history kind of moved away from the court and from the chronicles and so on, because they wanted to kind of get a much more structural history, right? And there's kind of other work now in Mughal history, like Nandini Chatterjee's book, for instance, which is kind of turning towards family history or
that's for a much later period.
Yeah, so that was my question. That when you say there are no archives, I mean, would there actually, like even for the Punjab state, long-term family records or histories of any of the lineages or lineages and so on that you have looked at, which might yield something that is a history from below of the Jahangir period. I think in Nandini's book, there is just one Parwana or something that from Jahangir's time, I think, which is a copy of an original one, Nishan, I'm not sure. So it's I mean, there too, I mean, the court as such is very distant, but there are archives. So I was sort of pushing back against this idea that there are no archives, because really, I mean, what Mughal historiography, the cultural term, has done also is just kind of bring up new kinds of archives, right? So I was curious, is there like that kind of legal material or everyday administrative material or family archives and things for the Jahangir era, perhaps on the Pakistani side now, that might yield something, that we know for the later period. I mean, from like my area, the Maratha period, so it is lots for the later period, as you say, but nothing for this older. So I was curious.
Yeah, but as I said, of course you have, I mean, you'll always be able to find a couple of exceptions, like the one you mentioned, this Nishan or Parvana dating from Jahangir's reign. And we have collections, small collections of archives for that date, I mean, among which some of them date from Jahangir's period. Farhad Hassan has used them for his work on Gujarat. I mean, the farman in favor of the Krishnite temple of the Braj country have been used as well by Irfan Habib for a long time. But these are small pockets, and from what I mean, when I did my research, I did not discover like, but I didn't go to Pakistan, I didn't go to the Bikaner archives, for instance, or in the Deccan. But I mean, what you said about Nandini's book is, I think, quite representative. Is that okay? There is this family, but okay, you will be able to find, let's say, at maximum half a dozen of documents between before the mid 17th century. And when I was discussing this issue of archive, because at times, I mean, it's important for me because I'm thinking, wow, maybe I missed something, and maybe I did, and maybe I looked in the wrong place. But so even this colleague Navin Kanalu, who has written his entire PhD on this and who has discovered so many untapped archives in the Bikaner State Archives, I asked him again and again the question, and he told me that, yeah, before the reign, the late years of Shah Jahan, the situation is just as I described. So what, I mean, I'm all for, history from below. There are just some histories that you cannot write because you don't have the materials. Then you have the vernacular literature, which in a sense allow you to enter a bit that this lower strata of society. But as I said, for the religious communities, for instance, they do not, in the case of Jahangir, address the questions I was addressing. So they do exist, but what do I do with them? They do not connect with but of course it's in that sense, my book and my research is very traditional, and I'm perfectly aware of that. But on the other hand, I also believe that it's important to make the most of the kind of materials you have for a given period. And that's not because they are top bottom that you should not use them.
Thank you very much. I look forward to reading your book.
Yes.
So I have a couple of queries. So the first one is, should I turn the fan on?
No, I'm fine. I'm just being eaten by mosquitoes.
Yeah, that's why. That's the reason why.
Ah, d'accord. Okay. No, but otherwise we won't hear each one another.
So my question was, you said one of your main focus in the book is on Jahangir's religious policy. And you rightly pointed out about how Sheikh Ahmed certainly posed a competition to Jahangir in terms of his claim as Mujaddid al-Fisani, just like Jahangir and Akbar did themselves. But then there are the other cases. I was thinking at what happened to why did this is one of I think one of the very intriguing episodes in Jahangir's doing is why was he so rash and kill somebody like Qazi Nurullah Shustari? He had n number of Shia noblemen, n number of Shia clerics in the court. What actually drove him mad with Qazi Nurullah Shustari? Because if you look at his whatever his extant writings are, he was not making any big claims about his own self. Right? Unlike say certainly Jahangir said he was a madman who was making very big claims about himself, and I had to arrest him. Right? But Nurullah Shustari's writing, very standard Shia theology, right? And he was not making any untoward claims about himself.
Yeah, but still he was also affiliated with the Nurbarshia.
Right.
So.
But that's an allegation, right? And that's not that we have evidence of him. He was of course a Shiite cleric, but even if he was aligned with the Nurbarshia, why would Jahangir take such a radical step? Actually execute it. So that would be one of my questions. And the other question is, Jahangir makes no secret of his dislike of Abul Fazl. But what we see is like, say, we have these legends about how Badami had to, Badami's second volume of the Muttakut Tawari went missing because it had even worse things about Akbar, right? So we had the state apparently censoring for the Badami's writings, but Jahangir never did anything to censor Abul Fazl's writings, so did he?
No, but there is. But why
No,
would
it's
I mean,
circulation, right? The Algonama of the ideas.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
remain in circulation.
yeah. But he took steps against Badawi.
Yeah, he did,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
why not? When Abul Fazl he got.
Yeah, because he
killed,
built on, I mean, what he says in the Jahangir Nama is that I mean, basically he disliked Abul Fazl because he was too close to his father, but I think that he was online with I mean the ideology that Abul Fazl fashioned for Akbar. There was one thing, and I mean, how could he have, a censor the Akbarnama and the Aini Akbari, the last official chronicle of Akbar, something that had been patronized by his father. I don't see. I mean, okay, he was full of ambiguity towards his father, but go to the point of, and Abul Fazl also was had such a stature, such an importance as a man of letter for the whole administrative personnel of the empire. Yeah,
He wouldn't manage to put it.
no, for this number of reasons, but I mean your question about no, I'm always confusing him with another. Okay, I mean, when you read the Majalis Jahangir, so for me there are these two possibilities. There is the Shiite possibility and the Norbakhshia Messianism, and that would make a pattern with Sirindi. But as you're saying, there it was not as extravagant about his claim as Sirindi was, and not so open in any case. But if you read the Majalis Jahangiri, there is an anti-Shiite verve throughout it. So that's in a way a contradiction, in the sense of the empire was voluntarily attracting many people from Iran, and I mean, there was no question of practicing taqiyya in the land of Sulikul. That would have been something, and he, in the Jahangir Nama and elsewhere, he really prides himself of himself and his father for having built an empire where everyone, regardless of its creed, is welcome, and he systematically contrasts that situation with the sectarianism and the bigotry of the Safavids or of the Uzbeks. So, but in the case of Nurullah Shushtari, I have not been able to go beyond these two major hypotheses, and I've not found, there's been an article written not a couple of years earlier by Reza Boujavardi about Shushtari, but there is no specific evidence that would bring a clear light on this matter, so far as I know, but maybe you have come across.
So I'll just have one more question, and this is about the manuscript copy of the Diwan-e Hafiz that is preserved in the Khudabakhsh library. And you mentioned the marginalia that Jahangir used to scribble on the paintings and the illustrations of the book. And the legend is that Diwali Hafiz is Jahangir's personal copy. And so there is this practice of, whenever you are in a tight situation, you open your copy of Diwali Hafiz and Jahan, and you have in that particular text, on the margin, Jahangir's
I didn't know that.
What date he opened that page on, and what was the occasion, and whether that that omen was actually rightly predicted or not. So I was wondering whether we have had a chance to.
No, absolutely not. But I would love to. That's so interesting.
And they also sell a facsimile copy of the manuscript for the Kodalakshmi entry, so it's easier to access.
That would be wonderful.
You can buy it.
Yeah, and you can buy it. No, and just one last thing, Prasi was mentioning so much about how Jahangir, even though he got a bad press from historians, except art historians, I suppose, because art historians always have good things birds that were being painted and the animals were being painted. But in the traditional Urdu historiography, and I'm thinking of people like Muhammad Hussain Azad in 19th century, or Shifty in later half of the 19th century, they always remembered Jahangir with a lot of fondness, especially his affairs with Noor Jahan and then the Anarkali episode, which then becomes the Mughal Azam movie.
Yeah.
And you have a neighborhood itself in Lahore.
Yeah, absolutely.
And somebody has recently brought out a book on the Anarkali neighborhood. And the legends of the Anarkali neighborhood in Lahore and the pictures and all.
And that's why Lahore itself, the city and some of its old quarters itself may be an archive.
Yeah.
Especially because they still have the wall city and you have older neighborhoods like Anarkali. So that's what I was saying. That just kind of piggyback on what you were saying.
But actually, the famous inscription from Salim to Anarkali, it's an archive within an archive because it is within the Punjab archive, and you have to get a special permission to access it. So far, I've not.
What is this inscription?
Saying that Salim, the Majnun, the love crazy of Anarkali, that's usually the evidence. But I think that what you're
Stone tablet.
Yeah.
It says from Salim the Majnun.
Yeah, in Lahore. But I think. But actually, I think that, your colleague mentioned the pop culture, and I also took that into account because, as you were saying, movies like Mughal Azam or Adle Jahangir. I remember I kind of tried to see how many films there had been about Jahangir, and this more popular memory of Jahangir is quite the opposite of the historiographical tradition I've presented to you. And in Mughal Azam particularly, it's very clear you have this Akbar representing a very inhuman and haughty rule, while Jahangir is a prince with emotions, and we almost look forward to his reign that will be more sympathetic, more empathic, less, state-like and emotionless. Different from that of Akbar as portrayed in the film. Yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, I had I'm so sorry. Should we go ahead and then I'll come back?
Well, I was actually asking about the Western account. You said that the mostly negative, and you take Rose example. Rose, of course, is negative, but there are, for example, I think of William Hawkins, who actually had a mansard under Jahangir, who was actually married with Jahangir's blessing to an Armenian woman, right? So, and then there's Thomas Corinne comes and who writes good things about Jahangir. Speaking of the Armenian, I think Ray Fitch also mentioned something about the Armenian. So what about these then? Because it's not always really negative, especially from these. Hawkins, of course, is mixed because these were not of course thinking, but yeah. So I'm just thinking if you have anything to say about that. Because it's not always like as clear cut bad.
Yeah. And to just take another instance, and that would be the link to the pop culture. If you take a later Western account, that of Niccolo Manucci, it's very interesting because it's like the more bizarre perceptions and traditions about the Mughals and Jahangir in particular. It's as if they had penetrated the account by Manucci, and so it's it's much closer. It's a very positive assessment of the reign. But Hawkins is also the first one to mention chronologically, first come the Jesuits, then you have contemporary to them Hawkins account, and is also the first one to mention the Nur Jahan junta. That's the work of Nurul Hassan, who has called them of Leni Prasad, sorry, who has called them a junta. So, but again, Hawkins did not got what he hoped at the court of Jahangir, but as you say, it's not as polarized as I made it sound. And if you take, for instance, the account by the Dutch factor at the end of the reign, there is no there is no particular agenda that accounts for. It is just that late in Jahangir's reign, he was ill, and kind of civil war had already started between, Nur Jahan's pretendant Shahriar and Khorram, who was supported by Asaf Khan. So it was a very hectic moment, and his writings about Jahangir, about the time, reflect this period of not of crisis, but of how to say that, unknown transition, in a sense that was a time where everything could go one way or the other, of uncertainty. But you're
Wants to go back. He wants to be sent back.
sorry.
Beltran almost wants to go back. He's very happy with that.
I'm sorry this is going on for such a long time. We don't
No,
have an audience, we tend to have an audience that asks endless questions. I wanted to ask you a little bit about literary style. I was thinking about the Babarnama. And this is something I confirmed that I have to ask Rajesh because I'm not a historian. I said, so Abul Fazl wrote the Babarnama. So he confirmed that Jahangir Nama was written by Jahangir himself. The Babarnama also was written by Babur himself. No?
Oh, sorry,
the Babarnama. The Babarnama. So the Babarnama, from what little that I have seen as a layperson of translations of it, or people who have written on the Babur, is full of very interesting episodes, personal glimpses of. There's a very famous instance of Babur trembling with desire for a young boy in a market, right? When he's in. On his campaign, on his way to India. So you are left as a general, as a lay reader, with these impressions of a personality of Babur complaining about the fruit. For instance, the fruit in India is terrible.
Everything is terrible.
Right? Everything is terrible. So you get a sense there of the, I don't know the language itself, myself, I don't know Persian or the language which is.
It's not in Persian, actually.
Yeah, so yeah, whichever, I mean, I don't know any of the languages, so I cannot read it in its original, but from the translations, from people who have written on, they say, I get a sense from the Bible. What is that sense that you get from the Jahangir, which you didn't speak about today's talk, but which you must have a sense of Jahangir from the Jahangir.
Absolutely.
Outside of the facts and figures and, you know, opinions or whatever it is else, whatever else is conveyed there, what is that sense and how does that convey itself in the literary style? That's what especially in contrast to the other famous one, Bhavana. I mean, I'm maybe not, of course.
No, but I mean, it's interesting to bring both the Baburnama and the Akbarnama in conversation with the Jahangirnama. So, for Jahangir, the Baburnama was a much important precedent, and he refers to it. And when he goes to Kabul, he says that he has seen a copy of the Jahangirnama and that he added of the Baburnama, and that he added a couple of sentences within the manuscript because for him it's very. I mean, it stresses the fact that because languages are also very important, and it stresses the fact that he has added a couple of sentences in Turkish because he still knows how to speak and write Turkish. And actually, this language omniscience, in a sense, is very much part also of the universalist claims he made. It's a very important aspect of them. And the style, even though they are written in different languages, Çağatay Turkish for Babur and Persian for Jahangir. So I don't know Çağatay Turkish, so I've read it through the translation, but the style is much simpler and accessible than the style of Abul Fazl, which is prolix. I mean, it's also about showing how many ways you can say the same thing with using different Arabic and Persian words, and it's very, very flourished. I don't know if you say that. Whereas, But Jahangir, it's much simpler, and you get, I mean, you have that's also what you have, the very administrative sections, which are kind of boring, but you have the same descriptions, even more than in the Baburnama, of nature, of encounters with people's relation of the traditions that he have heard somewhere. So it's a very lively narrative, and you really laugh reading it. Sorry?
Exported watermelons. So he writes that during my reign, the watermelons from Central Asia started coming to Delhi. How I wish my father could have these big watermelons. Yes, sir.
But if you allow me, I have an anecdote from the Jahangirnama, just 2 minutes of reading, which will give you a sense of his sense of humor. So the year is 1621, the place is Agra, and here is Jahangir in the Jahangirnama. At this time, it was reported that a blacksmith named Kalian had fallen desperately in love with a woman from his own caste and was constantly following her around. Although she was a widow, the woman refused him absolutely, summoned them both for an investigation. No matter how I tried to placate the woman and persuade her to accept him, she refused. Then the blacksmith said, "If I knew for certain that you would give her to me, I would throw myself off the top of the shabburj of the fortress." Just as a joke, I said, "Never mind the sharp word. If your claim has any truth to it, you'll have to throw yourself off the roof of this building. Then I will give her to you by command." These words were scarcely out of my mouth when he raced like a streak of lightning and threw himself down. As soon as he hit the ground, blood began to stream from his eyes and mouth. I really regretted having spoken in jest, and I was dreadfully sorry. I ordered Asafran to take him home and tend to him. However, since the cup of his life was full, he died of his injuries. So what do you do with that?
Good job to it. Understood. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Really was a great discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So you want photo? She's asking for a photo with all of us. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
so again, wherever you want.